Hi all. Wish you all a happy learning. Education is the key to unlocking the door to endless opportunities and empowering individuals to shape a bright future. Here I am M. Nirmala working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Applications, Henderson College of Engineering and Technology, is delivering you the concept of types of machine learning. Before to start with the types of machine learning, let me give you a definition on what is machine learning. Machine learning refers to techniques involved in dealing with vast data in the most intelligible fashion by developing algorithms and to derive actionable insights. To go with the concept of various types of machine learning, we have three categorization: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. In case of supervised machine learning, the models are trained using labeled datasets. There is a supervisor associated in case of supervised ML. And once the training is completed, the model is tested based on test data. In case of unsupervised machine learning, there is no supervisor associated. Based upon the hidden representations of the data and the structures associated with the data, we will be able to identify the patterns and come to conclusions. Reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is based on the principle of trial and error method. Like in general, a reinforcement learning comprises of an agent who work on the environment and is able to perceive and interpret the environment, and depending upon the environment progress, the actions are further taken. To go and deal with supervised machine learning in detail, here the machines are trained using labeled data. Labeled data refers to the input data which is appropriately tagged with the correct output data. So in case of supervised machine learning, the input values and the output values are explicitly given to the machine for it to get trained. Supervised learning is a process where input as well as output data are provided to the machine learning model. And the aim of supervised learning algorithm is to find a mapping function between the input variables and the output variables. To go on with the types of supervised learning, it has been categorized into classification algorithms and regression algorithms. The differences between classification and regression algorithms are both deal with the input parameters and output parameters. The differences encounters like the output variable is a categorical representation, then it is a classification problem. If the output variable is a numerical quantity, then it is a regression problem. To further move on, let us go discuss classification problem. Classification problem is the one where the target variable is a categorical representation. It divides the data set into classes, and the classification problem is being further divided into binary class classification, multi-class classification, and multi-label classification. In case of binary class classification, the target variable comprises of only two values or two classes. Let's take an example of a mail being spam or non-spam. In case of mail being spam or non-spam, the target variable can have only two values as either spam or non-spam, which we call it as a binary class classification because the target variable comprises of only two values. If the target variable comprises of more than two values, then we call it as multi-class classification. To be very clear, let us take the example of grades of students. The grades of the students can be O, A, B, C. Here the target variable is your grades, and here it is getting divided into 4 classes, which is the best example of multi-class classification. And to move on with multi-label classification, where the predictions may belong to more than one label. Let's take an example of a movie prediction. A movie can belong to a horror format or romantic, adventure or action. Or let us take an example of a movie where it deals with horror and romance and adventure, where you have multiple labels combined together. So this is a best example of multi-label classification. To move on with regression, regression refers to continuous values. What is a regression algorithm? The target variable is a numerical quantity. Then we say that it is a regression problem. And regression is helping to find the relationship between the input variable and output variable. And to be very clear, the output variables can be measured. Given an example of father's height, the son height can also be calculated. So here in this case, father's height is a input parameter and son's height is a output parameter or target variable, and the target variables are represented in numerical quantity, which we call it as measurable. This is a simple example of simple linear regression problem. If we are taking the example of multiple linear regression problem, where the number of parameters of x will be more than 1 and the target variable will be 1. Going to unsupervised machine learning, here the machines are not trained using a supervisor. The model itself gets trained by finding the hidden patterns and structures from the given data. The most important differences between the supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning is here the target variable is missing. There is no target variables, only the machine learning algorithms is given with the input parameters alone. The machine learning algorithm has to find the hidden patterns and representations by itself and has to give us the common following pattern recognition. And the types of unsupervised learning are clustering and association. In case of clustering, we discover the inherent groupings of the data, such as grouping customers by purchasing behavior. Association. Association is like inferring rules, right? You are going to identify or discover rules that is described in a large portion of your data, such as people who buy X will also be able to buy Y. To go with a deeper discussion, let us take an example of an process of playing blocks arrangements. Let's have here we have an example of block arrangements where you have circular blocks, triangular blocks and rectangular blocks. Now, based upon the concept of unsupervised learning machine learning algorithms, the algorithm can divide the or segregate the blocks as per the color representation. That can be one output, and also the blocks can be arranged based on the shape representation, which can be another inferences. So clustering is a method of grouping the objects into divisions or partitions such that objects with most similarities remain to one particular group and with less similarities belongs to another group. In our example, the objects with circular representation forms a group, the objects of triangular representation formed another group, and the objects of rectangular representation form another group. Association. An association rule in an unsupervised learning method is used to find the relationship between variables. What is the correlation exist among the variables of the input parameters? Let's take an example of the purchasing behavior of a customer. There is one customer who is purchasing bread, milk, fruits, wheat. So here the variables are bread, milk, fruits and wheat. And what is the association we have among all these variables is the one which will be identified in your association algorithm. And the customer 2 buys bread, milk, rice, butter. When if a new customer purchases bread, let's take the customer 1 also buys bread and milk. Customer 2 also buys bread and milk. So obviously the customer 3, if he is buying bread, then obviously he will be also buying the milk representation, and this is what you call it as an associative rule. Reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is based on the principle of trial and error method. To give you a simple scenario, let us understand how a child walks. So the first representation is noticing. The child notices human beings and it will register in its mind that we use legs for walking, and it will be able to grasp all these informations and tries to replicate you. Then the child will understand that before walking we have to raise up and stand, and obviously this is a challenge for the child for the very first time. So now the child attempts to get up, staggering and slipping but still determined to get up. After the child has stood up, there again remains a challenge of walking. Clutching thin air to find support, the child manages to stay standing because since it is an infant, it will not be able to stabilize itself on its leg for a quite long time. Now, the real challenge of the child is start walking. It has to keep in mind that it has to balance the body weight, decide which foot has to be put next so that it will be able to walk on the floor and where to put the foot. So these are all some challenges which a child may encounter when it is first practicing the walking format. Now, how let me just associate the walking of an infant with the example of a reinforcement learning. So the various elements of a reinforcement learning are problem statement, agent, environment, actions, state, reward, negative reward. Now let us take the example of a child walking principle with the concept of reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is the one which always deals with trial and error method. The child cannot walk perfectly on the first format or on the first type. So obviously it has to go with so many trial and error method. It will look into the environment, learn things, and then further it is going to execute its plan. And the problem statement for this problem is to walk or walking of a child. Who is the agent? The agent is the child which is going to experiment itself. Where is the environment? The land area where the child walks. Actions, obviously the child has to perform walking. State, the child first is sitting, it has to raise up, it has to put its baby steps, it has to move on till it reaches its destination. So state is keeping baby steps to move from one place to another to reach its destination. Reward, when the child is able to perfectly reach its mother, which is the destination, it will be able to get a chocolate from the mother. Negative reward, if the child is not able to walk, the child will not be able to get any chocolates from mother. So the child remembers all these informations in its mind to appropriately take actions and to reach the destination. And this is a simple diagrammatical representation of reinforcement learning, where the reinforcement learning comprises of various divisions like agent, environment, state, reward and action. Agent is the child, environment is the area where the child is planning to have a baby step of walking. Reward is once the child has reached the mother, the destination place, it will be able to get a chocolate. State refers to the baby step movement of the child from one place to another place to the in the environment, and the process goes on like this. So this is a simple example of reinforcement learning by narrating you the example of a walking of a child. I hope you might have enjoyed the lecture session. Thank you all. And education is the key to unlocking the door to endless opportunities and empowering individuals to shape a bright future. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.